Hi, Susan Liu here with Liu Real Estate and Property Management. And today I wanted to dive into a subject that's more related to property management than real estate, and that would be landlord's insurance and landlord's coverage on your rental property. I wanted to start with a disclaimer though. I am not a licensed insurance agent, so any information I give here is for educational, informational purposes only, and you should definitely speak with a licensed agent for more information on landlord's insurance versus homeowners insurance. So now let's explore what landlord insurance is compared to homeowners insurance. So there are definitely different coverages, and if you have a rental property, you definitely don't want to just rely on your homeowner's policy. You really need to convert it over or actually get a new policy that's a landlord's policy. So homeowner's insurance is the insurance you would have for your primary residence where you live. And so that would cover your structure, it would cover your contents, it would cover for theft or loss of you losing your own personal property. So that's what a homeowner's policy would do. So let's start with the definition of a landlord. So a landlord is somebody who rents out their property. It could be a home, it could be an apartment, it could be a condo. So if you're collecting rents and someone else is living in your property, then you are a landlord. And that's when you need to think about having landlord's coverage versus homeowner's coverage. Homeowners insurance is designed especially for your primary residence, where landlord's insurance is designed to cover your rental property, where landlord's insurance is also going to cover your structure, but it does not cover the contents because the contents belong to the tenant. It's also going to have some liability coverage, and it's going to have hopefully some loss of rent coverage, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I'm going to start by giving an example of what a landlord's policy might do for an owner when we've had a loss on the property. So let's say Annette has an apartment complex and one of her tenants accidentally starts a fire in her unit, and it not only affects that unit, but it affects some of the surrounding units with smoke damage, water damage when they came and put out the fire. So what Annette's landlord policy is going to do, hopefully, is a few things. It's going to cover the rebuilding from the fire damage, any cleanup that needs to be done, any repairs that need to be done to that unit and the surrounding units. If she has a clause in her policy that is for lost rents, then Annette's going to get rent during the time her property's down. So that's a really big deal, and you should definitely make sure your coverage has that. Speak to your agent about it. So she'll have that. If she is a smart landlord, and she makes sure that her tenant has renter's insurance, she'll be able to pull on that insurance, hopefully to cover her deductible on the property. So what we do in our property management office is we require all of our tenants to carry renter's insurance during the duration of their tenancy. So they need to carry at least $100,000 in liability. So if they do something on the property, then we can look to their insurance policy before we have to go to the owner's policy for repairs. So also on Annette's policy, if somebody was injured, then she should have coverage for that. So you want to speak to your insurance agent and say, I want to make sure that I am protected on my property for, theft, fire, flood, tenant liability. If I get sued by a tenant, let's say a tenant says you discriminated against them, all of those should be covered in your landlord's policy. So you'll want to have a conversation with that. And then also, like I said, you want to make sure you cover lost rents. That's a big deal. We had a property a couple years ago where a large tree during a storm, a large oak tree, fell onto the roof of the house, and it flooded inside because it opened up the roof. And I think that property was probably down being repaired for 6 months or more. And because that owner had her lost rents on her landlord's policy, she was able to keep getting rents during that time it was down. So that's a pretty big deal. You're without rents all that time. You may have other expenses that aren't covered by your policy, but because she had the right coverage, she was able to keep getting rent during the time the property was out of commission being repaired. So I wanted to just say landlord's insurance is not required by law. If you have a mortgage, they're going to require it, but it's definitely a good thing to have. I mean, you can see by the example I just said, would you want to pay out of pocket for all of that? And if you have not made your insurance on your rental a landlord's policy, if you just kept it as a homeowner's policy, they are not going to cover that for you. That's when they're going to catch you. They're going to say, hey, you rented this out. This is not a covered loss. So you definitely don't want to just try to fly under the radar and keep up your homeowner's policy instead of converting to the landlord policy. That is very, very, very important. So again, choosing your landlord's policy is something you'll want to talk to your agent about, your specific situation. If you have a multifamily property versus a single family home, does my home have a pool? Do I need extra coverage on that? Pools they're big liabilities on rental property, and people love to rent a house with a pool. A pool sounds great, but for the homeowner, it's a big liability. You need to make sure that you put your safety measures in place, and that could be anything from a pool fence with a gate that automatically shuts to alarms that alert someone inside the house if one of the exterior doors is open. So for example, if a child was going to exit out to where the pool is, someone inside would be alerted. You want to make sure you have as much of that safety measures in place. You can't be there all the time. You can't ensure that the tenant uses them. But if you end up in a court, you want to be able to say, I made every effort to make this property with a pool as safe as I could. And if the tenant chose to prop the gate open or remove the batteries and the alarms because they were annoying, at least your defensible position is, I had provided that and they chose not to use it. It's tragic either way, but at least you can protect yourself. And then you'll want to speak with your agent about those extra coverages for things like a pool. Fire insurance, big deal in California. You know, when I interview owners or they interview me, I never used to bring up landlord's insurance until we were into the transaction and getting ready to put the property on the market. And they would be like, oh, by the way, you should go ahead and get your landlord's policy in place. But now I have that conversation up front because insurance has become so expensive in California, and it could mean the difference between having a positive or a negative cash flow, and it may change your mind about renting it. So now when an owner's interviewing me, I say, okay, and by the way, please, before you decide that you want to move forward, hire me, do it yourself, whatever, that you should speak with your insurance carrier and say, I need to change this over to a landlord's policy, or I shouldn't say change over because you actually have to get a new policy, and make sure that that's affordable for you and that you can get the coverage that you need. I had an owner recently who did not have to have the FAIR plan on her homeowners, but when she went to get the landlord's policy, she was required to then go on to California FAIR plan, which we all know is very expensive, and it made her insurance a lot more expensive. She went ahead and moved forward with renting it, but it was definitely an eye-opener for her that she was going to have to be on the FAIR plan on this landlord's policy. So you want to do your homework on that before you decide you want to rent out your home. You also, when you speak to your agent, you'll ask them to get several quotes, and you might go out to a different agent, a broker who has a number of options, a number of companies in their tool bag, because you want to make sure that you're getting a good rate, because insurance is expensive. But don't just go with the cheapest, because you want to make sure that you've got the right coverage. Nothing would be worse than finding out down the line that, oh my gosh, I should have spent that extra $50 a month because I am lacking in a coverage. So make sure that you're getting the coverage that you want and that you need for your rental property. You might also speak with your agent about, do I need to alert you when my property's vacant? If you're between tenants or if you're doing renovations, they would obviously know if you're doing repairs due to a loss. But if you have an extended period of vacancy and you don't have a tenant in there, you might want to let them know, because they might need to change the coverage to cover a vacant home, because nobody's in there watching it, right? If you have a water leak, something happens and something starts leaking and nobody's in there to catch it, then you may want to make sure that they know that, so that if that were to happen, they don't say, well, you didn't tell us it was vacant, so we're not covering it. So just another little thing to think about. So just hopefully a little bonus. Insurance is expensive, but it should be another expense you can write off against your rental income. So I would say talk to your CPA. Again, I'm not a CPA. I can't give tax advice, but you should talk to your CPA and ask, is my insurance an expense that I can write off against my rental? And it should be, but you should check with your CPA. So I hope this video was helpful. If you need to get a hold of me or have more information, you can reach me through my Susan Liu Realtor Facebook page, or you can find my contact information on my website, which is Liu, Leu www.realestate.com. I'm here to help with any real estate or property management related needs. Thanks for listening. See you soon.